Hola, muchachos. ¿Qué tal? ¿Cómo estás? Señor G here. Wouldn't it be great if verbs always followed the rules like little white ángels? But as we've seen, sometimes they are little red diablos because they break the rules. We call those irregular verbs. Sometimes they follow certain patterns, and we call those stem changing verbs. Sometimes we can live with the change if we read that the verb has changed spelling, but when we hear it, it sounds the same. We call those little gold ángels. And sometimes when there are some changes and the pronunciation changes as well, but there's not too many, we look at those as little blue diablos. Let's look at some ahead now. We looked at these diablos or irregular verbs on another present tense video. We use these all the time. Notice ser completely breaks all the rules that we know, and so does a star with its accent marks in there. Here's some other verbs we use all the time, and they are irregular. Later on, we're going to find some verbs that follow some patterns that'll help us recognize them, but these, you're just going to have to memorize. Here they are again all on one page. These either break the rules completely or combine a few rules that we're going to look at in a moment. We use these all the time in Spanish class, so you may want to stop the video here and jot these down in your portfolios. Wow, that was a heavy load. Let's take it a little bit easier with this next group that we call spelling changers. They're really not irregular at all. They follow the rules most of the time. That's why you see the little ángel there in gold. These follow the rules except in the yo form, where you see these verbs ending in ger or gir, where the g changes to j. Look at proteger. Yo protejo has a J in it, but then the rest keep the G. Or exigir, in the yo form, the G changes to J, but then throughout the next, the G remains. You see some verbs below that also follow this pattern. And down below that, you see two verbs with an asterisk, elegir and corregir. They also change G to J in the yo form, but they have some other changes that we're going to talk about later. Here's another group with the gold ángel that mostly follows the rules except in the yo form. Verbs that end in guir change the gu to g. You see yo distingo with a G and yo sigo with a G, and the rest follow with the gu. There's very, very few of these, and that's why I've included some with an asterisk, and we will talk about other changes those have later on. The little gold ángel here again tells us that these really aren't irregular verbs, that they are spelling changers, that they follow the rules most of the time except in the yo form. Verbs ending in cer or cir, the c changes to z in the yo form. For example, yo venzo with a z and yo esparzo with a z, but throughout the rest, to through ustedes, they follow the rules. There's a handful down below that also follow this pattern. One more thing to say about these gold ángels. Even though we're changing the spelling in the yo form, we're preserving the sound or the pronunciation throughout the conjugation of that verb. We can't say the same thing for the verbs we're going to see next. These also just change in the yo form, but they also change the pronunciation in the yo form. So instead of seeing the gold ángel, we're going to see a diablo. He's blue because it's only one small change. So verbs ending in cer or cir are going to change the c to zc just in that yo form. You have yo conozco, but then the regular pronunciation, tú conoces, él conoce, and so on. You have yo conduzco, but then the regular pronunciation, conduces, conduce, and so on. The verbs you see down below also follow this pattern. These verbs here all put a G in the yo form. For instance, pongo, traigo, valgo, salgo, opongo, hago, satisfago. Even down below, tengo, caigo, vengo. There aren't really too many of these, so you see some here with asterisk that have other changes as well. We'll talk about those later. Here's some other verbs, odds and ends, that follow the rules in a lot of cases but have their own little individual changes. There's another set of verbs, and there's quite a number of them that we call stem-changing verbs. The rules of conjugation are pretty consistent, so once you can recognize these types of verbs, you should be pretty comfortable in conjugating them. In this first group, we have certain verbs ending in ar or er, where in the stem you change the e to ie, or if you see an o, that changes to ue, except in the nosotros and vosotros forms. Here's cerrar, an AR verb and also a stem changer. We'll drop the infinitive ending and watch the E change to IE here. But for nosotros and vosotros, it changes back. And finally, we're going to drop the E and change it to an IE. Let's do the same thing here, and notice that entender is an ER verb. Drop the ending, watch the E change to IE. But back in the nosotros and vosotros form, and now let's change the E to IE again. Here's an AR verb, mostrar. It's also stem changing. We'll drop the ending and watch the O in the stem change to UE. Now back to the infinitive stem. And O is going to change back to UE in the third person plural.
Do, 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 do.
Let's do that again. Notice poder is an ER verb. The O is going to change to UE. Back to our infinitive stem for these next two, in nosotros and vosotros. O changes to UE in the third person plural.
Do, 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 do.
You might have heard before that these stem changing verbs are also called shoe verbs. Now you know why. The part where we change E to IE, ciero, sierra, sierra, and cierran, all fit on the shoe, whereas the nosotros and vosotros forms do not. Here's some verbs we use all the time in Spanish class. Now you'll recognize them as stem changers. Remember, they don't change their stems in the nosotros and vosotros forms. Here's some verbs we don't use so much in Spanish class, but now that you know the rules we just talked about, you can conjugate them, right? Remember, they don't change the stem in the nosotros and vosotros forms. There are also stem changing IR verbs, although not as many. We still have the stem change E to IE and O to UE, although you'll basically only just see dormir and morir, and we'll add E to I. Let's conjugate some of each. Remember, we do not change a stem in nosotros and vosotros forms. For verbs ending in UIR, we're going to put a Y in after the U. For example, incluyo, incluyes, incluye, until we get to nosotros and vosotros. That's why you see the shoe there. The verbs you see down below, starting with the wir, also follow this pattern. These next ones are irregular because of the accent marks. Notice for reír and sonreír that we have an accent mark in all forms. For the bottom ones, we use an accent mark except in the vosotros form. Actually, we need these accent marks because we might be tempted to pronounce these words differently if they didn't have the accent marks. The rules of Spanish pronunciation would have us pronounce them differently but for those accent marks. And finally, here's some irregular odds and ends. They follow a couple of different irregular rules. You see, they all have spelling changes in the yo form, whether they change the pronunciation or not, and they also have stem changes going on here.